A year ago, we surely pledged our love to each other. I decided in my heart to live with this kind-hearted man. However, his attitude completely changed right after the marriage. The loving man he used to be is long gone. My husband no longer sees me as a woman. Now I'm treated just like a housekeeper. All you need to do is listen to me and stay quiet. That's his catchphrase. I wonder how long this life will continue. At that time, I had no way of knowing that a ray of light would shine on me. My name is Michelle Jenkins. I'm 28. I work as a secretary at my father's company while also being a housewife. The company, once managed by my grandfather, was taken over by my father 2 years ago. Being the daughter of a business owner, I've always been kept at a distance. The men who approach me are mostly after money. Of course, I've never really been in love. At one point, I stopped telling people about my family background. That's when I met the man who would become my husband, a man named David. I had asked my friend who introduced us to keep my status as the boss's daughter a secret. David doesn't gamble or smoke at all. He does drink, but never to excess. He was my ideal man. He would tell me he loved me and that he adored me. I thought I could spend the rest of my life with such a man. However, when I decided to marry David, my father said this: "Michelle, it's fine if you marry him, but could you keep it a secret that you're the boss's daughter?" Dad, how many times have I told you? He's a very good person. He's not after money at all. That may be true, but I don't want you to have a hard time because of that. But if a year passes after you're married and David is still the same, let's talk about the company together. You can apologize for keeping it a secret then. All right, if you're that insistent, Dad, I'll do as you suggest. I agreed reluctantly with my father's proposition. My father knew of my past heartaches with gold-digging men, and as an overprotective parent, he worried I might get hurt again. I decided I could share the truth with David after a year, as per my father's advice. And until then, I would just be an ordinary secretary. And so, under these circumstances, David and I got married. Now, a year after our wedding, I still haven't revealed the truth to him. The reason is simple. He is no longer the kind man he used to be. As soon as we got married, his behavior became cold and distant. He would come home from work, already in a foul mood, and began to nitpick at the dinners I prepared. "Hamburgers for dinner? Again? We're not children. Can't you think of anything else?" "But, David, you used to love my burgers, didn't you? I've made them countless times before." "Don't talk back! You're always short on dishes. Besides the easy dishes, like salad and soup. You should be able to make at least 5 other dishes." 5 dishes? That's a lot. I have work too, you know. I can't manage that much. "What? When I tell you to do something, you do it. I married you, so you should listen to what I say." I'm sorry. The warmth and kindness he used to show were gone, replaced by a coldness as harsh as ice. At the time, I only thought, he must have had a bad day. But his behavior started to get worse. By the time half a year of our marriage had passed, David had become a full-fledged tyrant. Not just about the cooking. He would complain about everything, from the way I folded the laundry to how I cleaned the house. If I tried to protest, even a bit, he would yell at me with a terrifying look on his face. Just being yelled at would have been bearable, but sometimes he would even throw the meals I made into the trash. A year after our wedding, his tyrannical behavior hasn't changed, and if anything, it's getting worse. Just the other day, I was delayed at work and didn't get home until after 7 p.m. As soon as I said, "I'm home," he started yelling. "You're late! What time do you think it is?" I'm sorry. Work just got a bit out of hand. I'll start on dinner right away. Work got out of hand? A mere secretary like you don't have that much work to warrant staying late. But I really did. I'm handling some accounting tasks too, so there's a lot to process. Don't talk back to me. It's unthinkable for a woman to come home later than her husband. Next time, if you come back later than me, you're quitting your job. That's not fair. From fear of David, I couldn't talk back. Looking back, I wonder if I should have left him sooner. But I was pushing against the worry of my parents when I married. I couldn't reveal the truth. I didn't want to sadden my mom and dad. So I silently bore it, all by myself. Then one day at work, during a break, my father called me into the reception room. I often went in and out of the reception room because I often assisted my father as his secretary. As I entered, my father was already inside. "What's up?" I asked. My father, looking pleased, replied, "It's been a year since you got married to David, right? I think it's about time you told him the truth, as promised." "Oh, yeah, we had that agreement." "Is something wrong? You don't seem happy. Didn't you say that David wasn't after the money?" "Well, yes, but it's just, right now, it's a bit..." Seeing my troubled expression, my father smiled and tried to comfort me, patting my shoulder. "Did you have a fight with David?" "Well, you're both young and newlywed. I guess it's inevitable. My wife and I also had our fair share of arguments back in the day, but look at us now, still happily together. I'm sure you'll be okay, Michelle." "It's not exactly a fight." "Don't worry, everything will be alright. I mean, every couple has their share of arguments, right?" "Well, I suppose you're right." "Anything else bothering you?" "No, nothing really. I'm okay, but I guess I want to wait for things to settle down a bit before I talk to him." "Ha! Well, don't let it get you down too much. A little marital spat is pretty common." It seemed my father thought we were just having a minor argument. To avoid worrying my parents, I hadn't consulted them about my husband up until now. Because of this, my father seemed to believe things were going well between us. "Well, you better make up with David soon." Saying that, my father left the room. Left alone in the room, I was choked with emotions I didn't know how to deal with. I had married David despite my parents' concerns. I absolutely couldn't tell my father about the deteriorating relationship between David and me, but sooner or later, I'd have to talk about it or risk arousing suspicion. To prevent my father from becoming suspicious, I had to maintain my relationship with my husband, somehow. And if possible, I wanted to steer our relationship in a positive direction. That night, I came home on time to talk with David, waiting for him to return. Just as I finished making dinner, he came home. I immediately broached the subject with him. "David, there's something I want to talk about." "Huh? I'm tired, you know." "It's important. Look, we're married, right? I want our relationship to be equal and enjoy our lives together every day." "Equal? Huh? What are you talking about? There's no way you and I are equal." My husband grabbed my hair, yanking it up harshly. "Ouch!" I couldn't help but cry out, but he didn't let go. As if mocking my wincing face, he slowly opened his mouth. "Listen well. I'm the one who did you the favor of marrying you. Be grateful that I deigned to marry a plain and useless woman like you." "Did me the favor? David, didn't you say you loved me?" "Don't make me laugh. I just pretended to like you because you seemed obedient and would be a handy housekeeper." That's not true. You just need to be quiet and listen to me, housekeeper." With these words, he yanked my hair towards his face. From that day on, I gave up hoping. There was no chance of us being equals. And I didn't want to worry my parents, nor could I get a divorce. My appetite dwindled day by day, and I ended up just living with my roommate, my husband. Then one day, while living such a life, I woke up feeling completely exhausted. My head hurts, and I feel a chill. When I took my temperature, it was a whopping 104 degrees Fahrenheit. I forced my aching body to sit up and called out to my husband. "David, I'm sorry, I don't think I can make breakfast today." "What? Why not?" "I've got a fever of 104. I'm in so much pain. Can I just stay in bed for the day?" At this, my husband let out a long sigh and yelled, Slacking off chores because of a stupid fever. Get to work, you good-for-nothing." "But, please forgive me. I'm really sick." "Shut up! Stop making excuses. You're just a housemaid. Don't you dare defy your master." "Please, just for today. I'm begging you." He clicked his tongue loudly, swung the door open with a bang, and left the room. Next thing I knew, my hands were shaking, and my body was trembling uncontrollably. I finally realized just how close to the edge I was being pushed. If I continue like this, I'll break down, for real. Continuing to live like this, it'll drive me mad, body and soul. I need to do something, but what can I do? I want to think of a way out, but my fever is making my head heavy, and I can't think straight. Maybe it was because I'd been on edge for so long, but I fell back asleep. Several hours later, I was awakened by my husband's raging voice. "Hey! Didn't I tell you to wake up, you dumb woman?" "Huh? David." Outside the window, it was already dark. My fever had gone down a lot, but my body was still heavy, and a faint headache lingered. Despite my state, he vented his anger. "I called you multiple times. What are you doing sleeping?" "Called?" "I sent you a text saying I'm bringing my boss home, prepare drinks and snacks. Didn't I?" "Huh? Wait a minute. You knew I was sick today, right? And yet you brought your boss home?" "I invited him to continue drinking at home. My promotion depends on this. Get up and get things ready, now!" "No, I can't. I'm still in my pajamas, and I'm not feeling well at all." "Shut up! Just get out here, now!" As he yanked me by the arm and forced me to stand in the kitchen, my husband then hurried back to his boss, who was likely waiting at the entrance. "Sorry to keep you waiting. Please, come on in." From the entrance, I could hear my husband speaking cheerily. "Are you sure this is okay? This late? I'm sure your wife wouldn't appreciate." "That's what I've been saying. I don't have a wife, just a housemaid." "A housemaid?" "Sort of like a maid wife, you could say. But please, don't mind." As he said this, my husband led his boss into the living room. I was in my pajamas, without any makeup, so I bowed my head in embarrassment. "Nice to meet you. My husband is always telling me about you. I apologize for my appearance." "Ah, I'm the section chief, Mr. Smith. I'm sorry for intruding so suddenly." "Please, don't mind me. I'll prepare something right away." As I returned to the kitchen, hiding my face, my husband let out a tirade. "Hey! Get a move on and make something! You're absolutely useless!" I'm sorry. Just wait a little bit longer." "Instead of opening your mouth, move your hands! Despite the section chief taking the time to visit, how much more do you need to embarrass yourself before you're satisfied? Huh?" I'm sorry." "Sorry about this, Mr. Smith. Our maid is really quite useless." The section chief sat quietly, his face slightly contorted. Even as I prepared and brought over the drinks and snacks, my husband kept making snide remarks like, "You're really useless." When my husband went to the bathroom, Section Chief Smith started to speak. "Excuse me." There was no way I could ignore him. Although I was flustered, I responded, "Yes, is there something you need?" You're the daughter of CEO Allen, aren't you?" My maiden name was Allen. He was referring to CEO Allen, my father. What? How did you... I had previously visited your father's company regarding a business deal. You served me tea then, didn't you? Wait, you were from that time? I usually attended all interactions with our business partners. Each time I served tea and was introduced as the daughter of Mr. Allen. And Smith, he was one of those people. I was informed that David's workplace had become a client of my father's company, but I had not yet told my father that David was working at Smith's company. While glancing towards the bathroom, Smith continued in a hushed tone. "What's up with your husband's behavior? Is he always like this at home?" Yes. I can't believe what you've been through. Why haven't you told Mr. Allen? That is... Regardless, we can't let this continue. Leave it to me." Smith, while looking at me straight in the eyes, quickly packed up his things and left. In that moment, I felt as if something that had been restraining me was slowly being untangled. I felt a profound relief, as if I had finally found an ally. On the other hand, when David returned from the bathroom, he was stunned to find that Smith had left. "Why didn't you stop him, you good-for-nothing?" Despite his shouting, I decided to trust in Smith's words and endure it. Several days later, I was summoned by my father and headed to the company's reception room. Upon entering, I found Smith and a pale-looking David. Why is David here? And Smith, you're here too." I was confused, unable to understand the situation. In the tense atmosphere, my father started speaking with a stern expression. "I heard from Smith. You've been treated horribly by David, haven't you?" That is... "I understand. You're kind-hearted and you wanted to avoid worrying me, didn't you?" "Dad." "Thank you, Smith. Thanks to you, I was able to save my daughter." At my father's words, Smith bowed his head. Immediately afterwards, my father shot a withering glare at the ashen-faced David and coldly stated, "David, I can't believe you turned out to be such a scumbag. I shouldn't have let you marry my daughter." Wait! Please!" David pleaded, shaking visibly. "I had no idea you were the president of our business partner. I didn't know Michelle was a CEO's daughter." "Shut up! So if you knew, you would have treated Michelle better? You're truly a lowlife." No, there's no reason for this." "Oh, reason? I'm going to report you to your company's CEO. I'm acquainted with him, and we have a long-standing relationship." No way!" David filled his eyes with tears and crumbled to his knees. Then he turned to me with pleading eyes. Michelle? Say something to your father for me." "You want me to say something? Huh." I raised my voice to vent my pent-up frustrations. "Do you have any idea how much I've suffered because of your overbearing, chauvinistic attitude? I've been holding it in all this time. I tried to improve our relationship. It's you who ruined everything, right? Treating me like a housemaid and constantly berating me. Do you know how humiliating that was?" Wait, Michelle, please, forgive me." "Shut up! Don't you dare casually call me by my name. No matter how much you apologize, I will never forgive you. I don't care if you fall into hardship. You get what you deserve. If you understand, never show up in front of me again. Stay out of my life, forever." At the end of my outburst, David started crying uncontrollably. Smith grabbed his arm, bowed, and left the reception room. Afterwards, David and I got divorced. When my father informed David's company's president about the incident, he lost his job as well. It seemed David had a poor attitude at work and was fired considering these factors. Because he was fired for a valid reason, he didn't get any severance pay. After the divorce, David apparently went back to his parents' house. However, his in-laws already knew about the incident. I heard his father gave him a stern scolding and kicked him out of the house. Now, he seems to be working day and night at a factory where he can live in. He probably doesn't have much of a cushion since he has to make alimony payments to me. On the other hand, after the divorce, I moved back to my parents' house. Now, I've completely recovered and am focusing on my job. Since then, I've been meeting Smith regularly, and we have a good relationship. I'm not considering remarrying yet, but if I do someday, I want someone like him. When that time comes, I hope to build a happy family.
My name is Ashley, and I'm 27 years old. I was an only child raised by a calm and doting father and a lively, energetic mother. Their marriage was harmonious and joyful, even if Mom could be a bit too spirited at times. In fact, I got married wanting the kind of marriage life they led. Judson is my husband, who I met through a friend. Both my family and Judson's are in the food industry, but his family owns a popular French restaurant. They've achieved great success, operating several outlets in and around New York City. As the heir to the family business, Judson was involved in its operations. While we were dating, his anecdotes about the restaurant and his ambitions were entertaining. However, after marriage, I started to feel a twinge of annoyance whenever my family's business was compared to his. Running a famous restaurant is tough, unlike your family's business, which seems like it's about to go under. Arguing back was exhausting. My family's restaurant was not on the brink of closure, and if I may say so, it was not Judson who was sustaining his family's business. It was Todd. Todd was Judson's cousin from his mother's side. Orphaned as a child, he was taken in by Judson's family. Judson initially referred to Todd as a brother, but in reality, he treated him like a slave. The reason Judson's family business didn't fail was thanks to Todd's competence and his mother. Observing their family business as a daughter-in-law, it was clear that my father-in-law and Judson were simply arrogant. Without Todd and my mother-in-law, Judson's family business would undoubtedly go bankrupt. Their attitudes towards Todd and my mother-in-law, who were the ones contributing, were arrogant. Judson's logic was that since he had saved Todd from being an orphan, it was only natural that Todd should repay the favor. According to my father-in-law, since my mother-in-law was his wife, it was natural for her to serve him. In other words, they were both just pawns to them. Unlike the haughty father-in-law and Judson, my mother-in-law and Todd were kind. After graduating from college at 24, Todd took on a secretary-like role to Judson. My mother-in-law spoke to me, her face filled with sorrow. Todd would have been happier if he had been taken in by other relatives. My husband forcibly adopted him because Todd seemed useful to him. The kind-hearted mother-in-law was worried about Todd. However, she was frustrated that she couldn't openly defend him in front of her husband and Judson. Despite being the heir, Judson was incompetent. That's why he found Todd's competence irritating and was harsh towards him. He often complained about the employees and Todd to me. The employees only follow Todd's instructions. Well, if things go well when Todd gets involved, I think that's fine. The employees know what they need for themselves too. They show reluctance to follow Judson's orders because they have complaints against him. Todd was struggling to make the employees accept Judson's unreasonable instructions. In fact, Todd and my mother-in-law rarely voiced their opinions. They obediently followed the orders of my father-in-law and Judson. But behind the scenes, they were reworking the foolish strategies of my father-in-law and Judson into appropriate instructions. They were desperately making sure the business didn't fail while saving face for my father-in-law and Judson. That's why the employees respected Todd and my mother-in-law. Since getting married, I've observed Judson, my in-laws, and Todd and came to a realization. My mother-in-law and Todd were wise and competent. They knew that insisting on their way would cause chaos around them. They were gaining the trust of the employees while preserving the dignity of my father-in-law and Judson. On the contrary, my father-in-law and Judson were ignorant and incompetent. They didn't realize that their positions were secured only thanks to the competent people around them. If they were a little smarter, they would cherish my mother-in-law and Todd. They believed they were more competent than anyone else because they were at the top. They looked down on those around them because they overestimated their own abilities. I once told my parents about this when I visited my hometown. My mother sat drinking her loaded potato soup. "Ashley, just get a divorce and come home." My father gave a bitter smile at my mother's active encouragement of my divorce. It was too soon to talk about divorce, as we hadn't even been married for half a year. I was disappointed in Judson and my father-in-law, but my mother-in-law and Todd were good people. I can't just easily get a divorce, I thought, giving a bitter smile. My dad gave a gentle nod, but my mom, sipping her second bowl of pizza soup, suggested, "Well, why don't you get a divorce, marry Todd, and come help us out at our pizza shop?" "Mom, don't say such weird things," I protested heatedly, to which my dad kindly asked, "Ashley, are you troubled about something?" I sighed at my dad's question. He's gentle but sharp. I gave up and began talking about my issues with Judson. Judson is really a handful. Judson looks down on me, seeing me as just a daughter of a shabby pizza shop owner. That alone is irritating, but there were more problems. Just because I talk with Todd, he suspects me of cheating. Neither Todd nor I have such feelings. Todd is basically a brother-in-law to me. When I discussed it with my mother-in-law, she gave a deep sigh. According to my mother-in-law, there's a female employee Judson was interested in the past. However, that woman admired and liked Todd. Judson, angered, came up with a random excuse and fired her. It may sound rude to you, Ashley, but Judson hates losing to Todd. It was not jealousy, but a distorted sense of competition. Therefore, Todd knows to keep his conversations with me to a minimum. I'm fed up with Judson's selfishness, but Todd, who works closely with me, must be even more exhausted. When I talked about Judson's troublesome personality, my mother made a dumbfounded face. "What a petty man. He's too insecure. Don't you think so, honey?" "Yes, indeed." Talking with my mom and dad like this seemed to dissipate my gloomy mood. My mom has been spirited since she was a child, and my late grandfather had difficulty finding a suitable match for her. She was beautiful and a popular girl in town, but she was too energetic. Since she was the eldest daughter, her family needed a son-in-law to succeed her family business. The men my grandfather introduced to her shrank back from her overly energetic demeanor. My grandfather thought a gentle man would be suitable for his active daughter, and so the arrow pointed to my father. He was the son of my grandfather's close friend, well known for his gentleness and intelligence. When they had their first meeting, it was my mom who fell for my dad. According to my mom, my dad looked like a handsome actor when he was young. Even now, he's known as a refined man by the customers of our pizza shop. My dad, attracted to my mom's lively personality, decided to marry her. As my parents chatted amiably, I remembered an important matter. Can I bring Judson, my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, and Todd here next time? It was the first time for my in-laws and Todd to visit my parents' home. My mother-in-law wanted to greet my parents again, which is why she asked. My father-in-law and Judson reluctantly agreed. Surprisingly, Todd, interested in making pizza, volunteered to come. My guess is that Todd was concerned that my father-in-law and Judson might behave rudely. My parents were pleased to grant my request. Of course, we'll make them realize how delicious our pizza is. Mom, you're getting too excited. That's how I ended up bringing my in-laws to my parents' pizza shop. I hadn't expected a battleground to lie ahead. Well, actually, I had a nagging feeling something unpleasant was coming. Todd usually steps in when my mother-in-law can't control my father-in-law and Judson. It was certain that a storm was brewing. And then, the day came when we all visited my parents' pizza shop. The moment Judson saw my family's pizza shop, he sneered.
Still as old-fashioned as ever.
It was fortunate that my mother wasn't present in that moment. If she had heard him, Judson would have been banned from our shop right there. As I ignored him and went into the shop, my mom was waiting cheerfully. "Welcome, everyone. Long time no see, Judson. Ashley told me a lot about you." She didn't mean it in a good way, though, but I guess Judson didn't get her sarcasm. I don't know what Judson misunderstood, but he looked very flattered. My in-laws didn't get it, but it seemed that Todd did. He was smiling as if he understood the hidden meaning in my mom's words. It was rare for Todd to show his emotions. After my mother had greeted Judson and my in-laws, she turned to Todd. "You're Todd, right? So tall and handsome, you look like a model." Overwhelmed by my mother's forcefulness, Todd showed a puzzled smile.
"Thank you. I'm looking forward to today."
He shook her hand politely and headed towards the room where Todd and my in-laws were. My father was in the process of making pizza. When my mother tried to bring out some drinks and our popular side dishes, my father-in-law scoffed.
"Both the store and your mother are old and dirty."
I was both angry and chilled. As I looked, my mom was preparing drinks right in front of me. To be honest, I was too terrified to look directly at my mother's face. As I swallowed my fear, I heard a menacing voice.
"Say that again?"
My normally cheerful mother's voice, laden with quiet anger, was terrifying. Even though my mother-in-law and Todd tried to stop him, my father-in-law spoke again.
"Both the store and the old woman running this place are filthy. I think I'm going to get food poisoning."
My father-in-law's outrageous words were met with Judson's smirking agreement. My furious mother quietly put away the prepared drinks and brought out a 1-liter bottle of wine. She then sharply said to my father-in-law, "Hey, if you don't want your head split open like a watermelon, get out." My father-in-law was taken aback by her forcefulness, but managed to get out a parting shot.
Just like the daughter, the mother is also ugly."
As my mother started to swing the 1-liter bottle, my father rushed to stop her. My father tried to defuse the situation with a smile, but it was too late. My father-in-law and Judson spat at the entrance of the shop and left. My mom tried to chase after them, but my father and I desperately held her back. "How dare you call me an old woman? Call me miss!" "Mom, that's not what you're supposed to be angry about." Well, everything he said did piss me off, too. As my father and I desperately tried to calm her down, my mom finally calmed down a bit. My mother-in-law and Todd were profusely apologetic, but these two didn't need to apologize. The problem was my father-in-law's and Judson's condescending attitudes. The whole incident was caused by my father-in-law's derogatory comments about my family's home and Judson's amusement at them. I, too, was seething with anger over the heartless insults. My mother-in-law, noticing my state, spoke to me. "Ashley, I'm really sorry. My husband and Judson, they won't change. You can consider divorce for your own sake." Todd seemed to agree and added his own opinion quietly. "Sis, these incidents will continue. It would be best if you distance yourself." Seeing the regretful expressions on my mother-in-law and Todd's faces, I was conflicted. I could divorce, but I felt sorry for my mother-in-law and Todd. While my father and I were at a loss, my mother spoke up bluntly. "You two don't seem happy, especially Todd. You can leave whenever you want, right?" When my mother asked why he allowed himself to be used by a man like Judson, Todd looked at my mother-in-law.
"I'm concerned about my aunt. I can't leave her after everything she's done for me."
He felt no gratitude towards my father-in-law and Judson, but Todd was considerate of my mother-in-law. Additionally, he worried that if he left, the remaining employees would suffer due to the selfishness of my father-in-law and Judson. His concern for my mother-in-law and sense of responsibility were what held him back. Hearing Todd's true feelings, my mother-in-law began to cry. She felt guilty that Todd couldn't live freely because of her. As my father and I exchanged confused glances, not knowing what to do, my mother tapped Todd and my mother-in-law's shoulders. "Ha, that's easy. Leave it to me." My mother-in-law and Todd were taken aback by my mother's cheerful laughter. My father seemed to sense what my mother was going to do. I made up my mind too. After discussing what to do in the future, I returned home where Judson was waiting. The first thing I said to Judson was, "I'm cutting ties with your family." I declared our separation, unable to forgive my father-in-law's thoughtless words. Judson laughed scornfully, looking neither hurt nor bothered. He was a man incapable of contemplating an apology.
Huh? Alright then, let's divorce.
He insulted my family's pizza shop and seemed keen on divorce. I shoved the divorce papers I had prepared beforehand at him, and I gave him my final warning. No matter what happens, don't come crying to me after our divorce. Judson, who didn't seem to understand the meaning, was nonchalant.
I'll pay you alimony, you poor pizza shop girl.
I didn't need it, but I nodded so as not to arouse suspicion. And so just half a year later, Judson and I divorced. Excluding the presence of my mother-in-law and Todd, 80% of my life was stress. And with my father-in-law's thoughtless words, it became 100%. After the divorce, I returned to my parents' home. About a month later, my ex-father-in-law and ex-husband Judson came to me, pale-faced.
My wife and Todd are gone. They left divorce papers and a letter saying they were cutting ties with us.
I told my ashen-faced ex-father-in-law. How unfortunate. It's a late-life divorce, isn't it? As I laughed, Judson, even more pale-faced, spoke up.
The employees who admired Todd quit. I got betrayed by my brother.
As I was astounded by his selfish remarks, a chilly voice rang out.
Don't call me your brother only when it's convenient for you. I never considered you my brother.
Suddenly, Todd appeared, causing my ex-father-in-law and Judson to be utterly shocked. Then from the back, my former mother-in-law quietly emerged. While my ex-father-in-law and Judson were dumbfounded, my mother made a gallant appearance.
These two have been scouted by us, and also we've taken over your French restaurant.
My ex-father-in-law broke out in cold sweat at my mother's declaration. My father, observing the situation, modestly smiled.
It's nothing like that. Running a pizza shop was merely my hobby. My wife's family owns a group of restaurants, and they were kind enough to accept me as their son-in-law.
When he revealed the name of the company, my ex-father-in-law and Judson lost their footing, as they should have. Their restaurants were no match for the size of our company. There was a reason they had been running a pizza shop instead of being involved in the family business. A few years ago, my father had collapsed from overworking. Doctors suggested he should do something he enjoyed for his recovery. That's why my mother and I reopened this pizza shop my late grandfather used to run as a hobby. In other words, they just went undercover by running a pizza shop. During my parents' absence, their dedicated and skilled employees were running the company. My parents were actually overseeing their work while running the pizza shop. This was only possible because my parents were greatly admired by their staff. Under my mother's direction, our company took over the restaurant run by my ex-father-in-law and Judson. While they were complacent, the situation had changed. To the stunned ex-father-in-law and Judson, my father calmly said,
Based on what I've seen, I've judged that you both lack the abilities to manage a business. The employees have also voiced their concerns with your management skills, so we demand your resignation.
Standing next to my father, who was gently issuing a terrifying announcement, my mother firmly said,
We're leaving the management of the French restaurant to Todd. Todd, you can do whatever you want with these two. Stew them, roast them, crush them, you name it.
Ex-father-in-law Judson protested.
You can't do that without our approval.
But it was futile. This was not just my parents' decision, but the will of all the employees who were upset with their boss, my ex-father-in-law and Judson. My ex-mother-in-law would now be in a supporting role for Todd, her nephew. In other words, Todd and my ex-mother-in-law now had the right to fire my ex-father-in-law and Judson. Todd exchanged glances with ex-mother-in-law and calmly said,
I owe you for taking me in when I was a child.
My ex-father-in-law Judson had a moment of hope at Todd's kind smile, but it was fleeting. Todd changed his expression with an icy voice declared,
But I have a grudge 100 billion times greater than that. For Judson, it's 500 billion times greater.
In short, he would neither forgive nor be merciful. Todd declared that he was stripping my ex-father-in-law Judson of all their managerial authority. Then, my ex-mother-in-law said something even more horrifying.
I'd rather you vanish from my sight, but I'll keep you on as low-level workers.
Watching this spectacle, I felt a deep realization. People like my mother, who readily express their emotions, are actually much more predictable. Of course, my mother has her limits, but knowing when she'll act on her anger helps me stay mentally prepared. The most frightening are people like my ex-mother-in-law and Todd, who take on a lot of crap until it reaches their limit and goes off. The fact that they can bear insensitive words and deeds is proof of their strong core and kindness. My short-sighted ex-father-in-law and Judson had underestimated these two, and the situation had turned for the worst. It wasn't just the divorce with me, they had lost valuable human resources. Foolish people take for granted that kind people will forgive whatever they do. As a result, those who've reached their limit of patience have revolted, deemed unfit as managers, being turned away even by their close relatives. My ex-father-in-law and Judson were ousted. Working under Todd was humiliating for Judson, and he started crying. My ex-father-in-law yelled at Todd, calling him ungrateful, but it was too late. Although Todd holds a debt to gratitude, he harbors a grudge 100 billion times greater. Watching my ex-father-in-law Judson slink away in retreat, I said, "The mouth is indeed the gate of the evil." At my words, my father smiled.
Angering your mother was the end of their luck.
As I observed my softly smiling father, I thought, it was him who went off, though. My father is a devoted husband to my mother, a man who would not hesitate to bring ruin upon those who dared to insult his beloved wife, all with a smile on his face. Afterward, my ex-father-in-law Judson disappeared, having received some severance pay. It must have been humiliating for them to work under my ex-mother-in-law and Todd's surveillance. Although they should have quit, they used their severance pay to start a new business, which ultimately failed. The French restaurant was actually expanded by my ex-father-in-law's parents. My ex-father-in-law never had the skills to expand his business. Now, my ex-mother-in-law and Todd are managing the French restaurant entrusted to them. They were excellent managers who gained the trust of their employees. Todd, always quiet, had gradually become more comfortable with expressing his emotions. After telling my parents that I wanted to enjoy working in the pizza restaurant for a bit longer, I continued to work in the food service industry, something I've done since before I was married. I worked together with my colleagues who I had known for some time. One day, on my day off, I went to my parents' pizza restaurant and saw my ex-mother-in-law there. She seemed to be consulting with my mother about something. I asked if anything had happened to my father, to which they informed me,
Todd is about to turn 25. He's upset about being so focused on work and not having a girlfriend.
You shouldn't have to worry about that. I sighed, but then heard my mother's lively voice. There are countless girls who would want to marry a handsome and good man like Todd. I realized, then, that my mother was enthusiastic about introducing him to potential marriage prospects. But Todd might already have someone in mind. I was worried that they were being too forceful by arranging a meeting without asking him first. When I appealed to my father about it, he just smiled. Then I heard my mother calling me. Looking at my face, she smirked. "You've been listening to our conversation, right?" "Yes, I was, but Mom, you can't just set up a marriage meeting without asking Todd first." When I desperately objected, both my ex-mother-in-law and my mother laughed together. Feeling perplexed and unsure about what was happening, my ex-mother-in-law told me, "We know who Todd likes, but he just can't seem to say it himself." Then my mother continued, "Todd said he likes you, Ashley, but because you're like his sister-in-law, he feels hesitant." I was shocked because I hadn't noticed Todd's feelings. He's the type to keep things to himself, so much that I was completely unaware. Even though I thought he was a wonderful man, I didn't immediately feel any romantic feelings for him. When I shared my feelings honestly with my mother and my ex-mother-in-law, my father chimed in.
"It's okay. Todd said he'd take his time and gradually make you fall for him."
"Dad, I wish you kept that to yourself." At my outburst, both my mother and my ex-mother-in-law burst into laughter. And so, that's how I came to know that Todd was quietly nursing a one-sided love for me. I knew it would take forever for Todd to confess his feelings for me, so I asked him out first. Looking back, it was a clever strategy on Todd's part. Although we started off as a couple, I later asked him when he had started developing romantic feelings for me. At my question, Todd just smiled enigmatically. He never answered my question, but after 2 years of dating, we got married. In hindsight, my calm father and thoughtful Todd were quite similar. Only later did I laugh at the realization that my mom and I had similar tastes when it came to men.
Our hotel is reserved for celebrities. If you are poor, "Please do not come. Please leave," the manager stated flatly. Because of their appearance, guests at a 5-star hotel are treated with suspicion. I was reminded of this the next day. But the manager is still in the dark. He still doesn't realize how powerful my in-laws are and how unhappy he'd be in the future. My name is Maria, and I'm a 32-year-old housewife. I do not yet have any children. Stephen, my husband, and I met while I was working part-time at a supermarket. I knew he had to be a nice young man from the start of our relationship because he has a calm and elegant personality. However, I was taken aback when I visited his parents' house to talk to them about the wedding. Their house is so large that it looks like a school playground, and a heavy gate has been installed. It's so big that the block wall extends all the way around the house, making it impossible to see it. A more surprising scene unfolds once inside the gate. A magnificent country estate, resembling a luxury villa, stood at the end of the long stone pavement. A garden appears to have been attended by a gardener next to the house. I could even see what appeared to be a swimming pool and tennis courts beyond that. I couldn't believe what I was seeing and wondered why I had come. Stephen was a remarkable young man, but how could such a young man work part-time at a convenience store while attending college? I had no idea. Stephen claims that his family members are all presidents of top companies. His father, mother, sister, and Stephen. While there have been reports of celebrities sharing their family businesses with family, this is not the case with Stephen's family. They're all accomplished entrepreneurs who grew their own business. Stephen followed their footsteps, receiving the bare minimum in tuition fees and supplementing with part-time work. Because of this, I was able to meet Stephen. He started his own business with the money he earned from his part-time job and is currently trying to expand it. My family consists of a commoner father who works for a company, a housewife mother, and a brother who also works for a company. I felt like backing out, wondering if I could actually be his wife. Stephen, on the other hand, was not worried. "Your openness and cheerfulness attracted me. You're the only person I want to spend the rest of my life with." I decided to trust and follow him. What about my family-in-law? My heart was almost broken with worry, wondering if they would be let down by a commoner like me. The member of my in-laws' family who greeted me were extremely friendly and warm. They welcomed me with open arms, saying that Stephen had brought a woman home for the first time. Particularly, my father-in-law appeared to like me. "Maria, you have very beautiful, clear eyes. Your behavior indicates that you were carefully raised by your parents. Stephen's vision is correct." My mother-in-law and sister-in-law were both extremely gentle and kind, and by the time we left, we had completely opened up and became good friends. My parents also liked the gentle and calm Stephen and agreed to let me marry him right away. We were married after the conversation went smoothly. Stephen had just started his business, and he wanted me to quit my job and become a full-time housewife to support him. We bought an apartment near my in-laws' house and are enjoying our newlywed life, having dinner parties and barbecues at my in-laws' house on occasion. My in-laws are extremely busy, so we have a live-in nanny. She's in her 60s, but they treat the nanny as if she were family, and I am impressed by my in-laws' kindness. I was having a good time knowing that I should be myself without being intimidated by my celebrity in-laws. 3 months since our marriage, we decided to throw a party for my father-in-law's 60th birthday. Stephen and I were going to arrange the hotel because my in-laws had taken such good care of us at the wedding. However, because my husband is working, I will be doing the actual work. I discussed it with Stephen. "Your dad likes you a lot, so you can do whatever you want. I don't think he has a preference, so I'm confident he'll be content anywhere and with anything. The most difficult part is saying that I should be able to do whatever I want. When I spoke with my friend, she advised me to look for a high-class hotel if the president of a prestigious company is staying there. I found a 5-star hotel near my parents' house. Of course, because I have no ties with fancy hotels, I have never visited. Well, I assumed it had to be a good hotel, but I figured I'd have to see it for myself. First, I decided to check out the hotel. I was nervous about going alone, so I invited my best friend from high school to accompany me. I was impressed by the restaurant's extremely polite and courteous service when I called to make a reservation for lunch. This is a 5-star establishment. I thought I was dressed rather formally and nicely for a first-class hotel. I wore a white blouse with a black tight skirt and black pumps. My friend wore a nice flower print dress and pin-heeled boots as well. I felt happy and excited, as if I were about to embark on a trip. I had no idea I'd have such an unbelievable time there. I drove there in my car, which I've had since I was single, and was directed to the hotel parking lot at the roundabout in front of the entrance. The person who gave me directions was very pleasant and polite. At the time, I noticed a man in the lobby staring at me with a stern look. He wore a fine suit and stood tall and straight, his hair neatly parted into a parted style. He appeared to be a hotel employee, but we didn't recognize him. I was perplexed as to why he was staring at us so intently. There is a line of luxury black cars in the underground parking lot, and my car looked out of place. Some people were coming in chauffeur-driven cars and having their doors open for them, as I had noticed earlier at the roundabout, which made me feel a little self-conscious. I considered hailing a cab, but that would have been a waste of time because I wasn't far from home. The person who had just stared at my friend and I approached us as we entered the hotel. "You don't seem to fit in with this hotel. Can I assist you?" He said it politely, but I felt he was being very rude with his words. "I had made a reservation here for lunch. What do you mean by unsuitable for the hotel?" I inquired. The taller man continued to speak while looking down at me from above. "You came in a very ordinary car, but no one drives that kind of car in this hotel," the tall man continued. "Your clothing is also very—" He laughed when he said that. My face began to turn red. What a snobbish attitude. My best friend was unable to look at him, so she looked down. Normally, someone might become embarrassed and leave. I have a strong temperament, despite the fact that I appear to be a quiet person, and I wanted to know who was saying these hurtful things about me. I was curious as to who this rude person was. "Are you employed by this hotel?" I said, glaring at him. "I am the manager of this 5-star hotel." I thought to myself, I know he's the manager, but mentioning the 5 stars is just ridiculous. I had a thought, but did not express it aloud. His response irritated me greatly. "Does this hotel judge its guests based on their cars and appearance, and change its attitude depending on who they are?" I responded without giving up the fight. The manager sniffed and snorted in response. "A hotel's clientele is appropriate for its stature. It is necessary to maintain that dignity in order for guests to feel at ease and relax." I think I was getting a little irritated myself. "Are you saying we're degrading your hotel?" The manager's tongue clicked. I felt bad for my friend who I invited, and I considered canceling the reservation and returning home. Then, an elderly hotel employee approached me and asked, "Ma'am, may I assist you?" When I told him I had a lunch reservation, he bowed to the manager and said, "I'll take you to the restaurant." He accompanied me to the restaurant. The manager gave me a bitter look, as if he still had something to say to me. The hotel employee who showed us around was pleasant, unlike the manager. "You've come all this way. I'm sorry you've had such a bad experience. I'm sure you felt uneasy. I'm sorry. We are well known for our delicious cuisine. Please, have a pleasant stay." That man was quite young for a manager. How did such a young man end up running such a fine hotel? He informed me that the hotel's owner had retired due to age, and his younger brother had taken over, with the son serving as manager. The manager is supposed to have graduated from a first-rate university, but he has no experience in hotel management and is desperate to maintain hotel standards. Even old, familiar customers appear to be given the cold shoulder and forced to leave the hotel when they spend less. The elderly employee muttered sadly, "I, too, grew up with this hotel until I reached this age. According to the new management, the hotel needs to be revitalized. I guess an old man like me is no longer required. Actually, I'll be leaving at the end of the month." There was no hope for future growth if the hotel could not take care of its employees, who had supported the hotel and helped it grow to a 5-star rating. As the elderly hotelier had explained, the food was the most delicious and satisfying I've ever had. The head chef came over to greet us, and he appeared to be quite skilled. His age was roughly the same as the hotelier. I was concerned that he, too, would be forced to leave. People are happier when they are full, and by the time we left the restaurant, my best friend and I were beaming. But just as we were about to leave again, that manager approached us again. "I will visit your restaurant again soon," and we made the decision to leave. The manager, however, was undeterred. "When people like you walk around my hotel, you lower the hotel's dignity. This is a celebrity hotel, not for the poor. Please leave immediately." He stated it unequivocally. I couldn't argue with him, because I was too shocked. The hotel itself was lovely, but the manager was so rude and unpleasant that I decided not to hold my father-in-law's birthday celebration there. There must be a more accommodating hotel or restaurant nearby. When I told my in-laws about it, they asked which hotel it was. They all looked at me with interest when I told them the name of the hotel. They were looking at me with a puzzled expression on their faces. "Let's go to that hotel. I'd love to visit such a prestigious hotel." I couldn't understand why he wanted to return to the hotel where I had such a bad experience. "You don't have to dress up so much," my father-in-law said, and everyone was asked to go there in casual clothes. My father-in-law told us to go before him and that he would join us later. The manager's sharp gaze was fixed on us from the moment we entered the roundabout. There were a lot of people in the lobby. They were relaxing on sofas or drinking coffee. There were so many people that I wondered if the hotel was hosting a large event. The manager rushed in as we sat on a sofa beneath a large chandelier, waiting for my father-in-law. He screams and glares at me. "You've returned here without having learned your lesson. You don't learn, do you? You arrived at my hotel in a minivan. You are a bother." He was still being snobbish. "We came to celebrate my father-in-law's birthday today. I reserved a table for us. You didn't say anything about a card type, did you? What's the problem?" "Not to be outdone," I replied. Everyone in the lobby was paying attention to us because we were arguing so loudly. "I can tell you don't belong here by the way you were dressed. You are dressed so casually, you'd seek one of those dirty little inns." The manager's response was absolutely horrible, and the other guests were raising their eyebrows at the manager's response. "The hotel is a place that anyone can use, right? We're going to pay. The criteria for welcoming guests is ridiculous, and a hotel that treats guests like this is absolutely disgusting." When I said that, people around me said, "The customer comes first, right? It's not right to be selective based on appearance." Hearing this, the manager, flustered, turned red, and shouted, "We are a high-class hotel. We cater to celebrities. If you are poor, please leave." "Well then, let's all go home." "What?" Hearing my father-in-law, many people in the lobby quickly got up and started to leave. All of them said, "I will never come back." I will never try to stay here again." They tried to leave, and they had a big argument with employees who rushed to stop them. In fact, the people in the lobby were all connected to my father-in-law, who had gathered there at his urging. The reason my father-in-law was a little late was because he had contacted these people. My father-in-law had been a frequent guest of the hotel since the time of the previous manager. He was so busy at the beginning, he would often pop into the hotel in his work clothes, but he fell in love with the hotel's way of treating every guest with the utmost respect. My father-in-law's company used to throw a lavish party here every year. He introduced the hotel to his family, and they often used this hotel as well. After all members of his family are company presidents, so the frequency of these parties were very high. My mother-in-law frequently used the hotel to entertain clients, and my sister-in-law used it for training sessions for executives. My husband's company uses it for celebratory events for its employees. Each company, of which my in-laws are the president of, were super important to this hotel. "Please forgive me!" someone shouted loudly and got down on his knees. It was the hotel president, the manager's father. The elderly hotelier from the other day had remembered my father-in-law's face and called the hotel president in a hurry. He apologized for the rudeness of his idiot son and made the manager get down on his knees as well. "I am truly sorry, sir, but if you were the president, I would treat you differently if you had told me. It is bad of you to use poor people to make reservations." He made excuses. It seems like there is nothing to say to this person. "You're apologizing to the wrong person. It was my son's wife that the manager got treated badly. She is a kind-hearted girl whom I cherish as much as my daughter. You should remember who the hotel is originally for. I have gratitude to your predecessor here, and I had been very close to him, but now it is time for me to end it." We left that 5-star hotel. We then moved to a diner that I often go with my own family to celebrate my father-in-law's 60th birthday. The restaurant has several private rooms, and you don't have to make a reservation to get in. The food was excellent, and my in-laws were delighted with the cozy atmosphere. My father-in-law suggested that we invite my parents as well, so they joined us and we had a grand and lively celebration. My husband and I paid for the party. Since it is a common restaurant, it isn't that much of a burden. I thought once again that we would continue to be steadfast in our creed of not getting carried away by money and not being misunderstood. Later, according to a rumor, the manager was fired and forced to start again as a cleaner. However, it was difficult to regain the reputation that once fell to the ground, and 2 years later, the hotel was closed. The next time I passed the hotel, the glass was broken, the tables and couches inside were piled up in front of the roundabout, and it had turned into a wasteland. The hotel's traditions had been shattered by a single misguided person. My father-in-law, who originally grew up in a typical family, and I get along very well, and I enjoy spending time with my husband and my in-laws. Now that we know I am pregnant, everyone is looking forward to it.
You don't have a ticket? Poor people like you can't possibly understand music. I found myself at a classical concert venue thanks to my father-in-law and mother-in-law, yet my ticket was mysteriously missing. How dare a poor person like you try to be in the same place as us? Go home. I was clearly being discriminated against, but the person who reached out to help me was my mother-in-law. Little did my sister-in-law know, she was about to hit rock bottom. My name is Betty. I fell in love with music at a young age. Being surrounded by the music I love was always a joy, but due to my shy and reserved personality, I never really played with others. I just play alone with toy instruments. We weren't a wealthy family, so taking music lessons was out of the question. In elementary school, I joined the wind ensemble without hesitation, and I stuck with it through high school. But whenever we had to play as a group, I was always the one dragging everyone down. That experience became a sort of trauma, making me uncomfortable in group settings, even outside of music. I found peace when playing an instrument alone. I often played in a corner of the music room. That caught the attention of my music teacher, who introduced me to a known musician. I was told I had a rare talent in music, but because we weren't well off, my parents never really understood or supported it. I always thought that maybe if I could get proper training, I'd be comfortable playing in a group setting. But due to my family's circumstances, that was never an option. I eventually gave up on pursuing music professionally, settling for enjoying it as a hobby. When I received my first paycheck as an adult, I went to my first ever classical concert. I was a big fan of a certain family of musicians who I looked up to and admired. The tickets were expensive, even for the worst seats. But I thought it might be my first and last concert, so I went for it. No regrets. I got a lot more out of it than the price of the ticket, and I was very satisfied. I'd love to go again if I get the chance, but I can't keep buying expensive tickets all the time. I'm contributing some of my salary to my family, and I have to save for a wedding too. As for marriage, I'm just waiting for the day I meet someone who feels right. After working for 3 years, my parents have started hinting that I should start thinking about my future. Back in the day, people usually got married in their late 20s to early 30s. My mom married my dad around that time too. Now, personal choice is highly valued. My parents seem to understand this and don't nag too much. But the lack of pressure makes me feel like I need to hurry up and get married. Even after getting a job, I'm still shy and introverted. I've been invited to group dates by female coworkers, but never really talked to anyone. Just being able to consider going on a group date is growth for me. So I decided to start with online conversations through a dating app. I met a guy who loves music and we hit it off online. After exchanging messages for a while, he asked to meet up and I agreed. When we met, I realized he was one of the members of a famous musical family I'm a huge fan of. People might wonder why I didn't recognize him from his profile picture, but who'd ever think it was actually them? His name was common enough not to suspect it was really him. And if he knew I was a fan, I feared he'd turn me down. I kept it a secret at first, but eventually decided to open up. I told him about my shyness and how I'm uncomfortable in large groups. He said, "I feel the same way." The more we talked, the more we clicked, and we decided to get married. When I told him I was a fan, he said he was honored and his smile was radiant. Things moved smoothly and a date was set to meet his parents. His family members were usually busy touring, but there happened to be one day when they were all home. I nervously entered his house and waited for his parents and his sister-in-law entertained me in the meantime. She said, "As you might know, we're a musical family. If you can't play at least a violin, you're not really part of the family, you know?" I was in trouble. I had never touched a violin in my life, let alone played one. The school's band club didn't have room for violins. That's when her parents stepped in and said if she had musical skills, any instruments would do. But his sister-in-law insisted on the violin. Then he said, "Mom, don't we have a practice violin? Can we borrow it?" And he added, "Please give Betty and me some time for a quick lesson." His mother agreed. "Why not? It'll be interesting to see what you can do in about an hour." A string instrument, and a violin at that. I wasn't confident I could make a sound in just an hour. "But trust me, Betty, you'll be fine," he said. I took his word for it and even asked my mother-in-law if she'd lend me her violin. He has a practice room and we spent an hour there. It was my first time with a violin, one-on-one. Honestly, I was terrible, but Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star is a song I know, so imagining it was easy. I focused on putting emotion into my play since my technique was non-existent. "You're doing great, Betty," my mother-in-law said. "Just making a sound on the violin is hard. You've come a long way, especially considering it's your first time. You're giving the music the respect it deserves." He also said, "You moved me," and gave me a big round of applause. The only one who looked unimpressed was my sister-in-law. I guess she thought I'd embarrass myself. She never expected me to actually be liked by her mom. And so, I was accepted into this musical family. I've officially become a married woman. The relationship with my father-in-law and mother-in-law is good, but a problematic hierarchy with my sister-in-law is emerging. She picks on me, makes snide remarks, and harasses me. She's very pushy and always retaliates if I talk back. I don't have the courage to do so, but that seems to irritate her even more. Either way, the harassment increases. When the family was on tour, there were days where sister-in-law didn't perform due to the tour structure. On those days, it was just sister-in-law and me left at home. Although we had a housekeeper, sister-in-law insisted that I should cook. After tasting it, she kept saying it was awful and poorly made. Even when she told me to remake the meal, she'd throw it away right in front of me, saying she didn't want to eat it anymore. She even spills soup intentionally. Acts like stepping on the small of my back or putting her foot on my head also happen. Even during family dinners, I get called to the bathroom. When will you learn proper table manners? I don't want to share a table with someone like you, she said. My husband, father-in-law, and mother-in-law think I'm getting better, but she says, I can't believe you can't even manage that. I don't think I'm as ill-mannered as she claims. Still, the sadness and frustration of not being acknowledged make me feel pathetic. After she leaves, I hide and wipe away my tears. Then my husband comes and says, I was worried when you didn't come back. Wait, why are you crying? Is she giving you a hard time? Don't hold back. Tell me everything. What a sweet man. I almost said, actually, but I heard the joyful laughter from the family gathering and I didn't want to upset him just for me. If I could be patient, wouldn't it keep the peace? No, it's not like that. I get along with her, I said. But you were crying. I was just so happy to be married and accepted by everyone. I couldn't help but cry, I said. My husband seemed to ponder briefly but soon agreed. Yeah, you're right. He then took my hand saying, let's continue with dinner, and led me back to the dining table. It looked like we'd finally get some downtime from my father-in-law and mother-in-law. They even suggested going to a classical music concert as part of welcoming me. Listening to various performances and interpretations from different conductors can be enlightening. They asked me which concert I'd like to attend. I recommended one that my father-in-law and mother-in-law had previously enjoyed. We found out that they could possibly get tickets through a connection they had. However, my sister-in-law says she wants to handle the tickets. She claims she has some pull with the people involved. On the day of the event, we arrived at the venue and my sister-in-law heads over to the staff entrance. After a brief chat with the staff, she comes back with something that looks like tickets. One by one, she hands out the tickets to everyone. However, there was no ticket for me. People who are broke wouldn't understand music anyway, right? Excuse me? You and I are in different levels. Know your place. Now go home. You don't belong here. My husband offered to ask if any spare tickets were available. However, I didn't want to worsen my sister-in-law's mood and make things uncomfortable for everyone else. So I decided it was best to leave and started pulling my husband away. Wait, Betty, you're not the one who needs to leave. It's her who's always mistreating you. Mother-in-law, who had been silent, pointed at sister-in-law. Why me? Listening to music has nothing to do with being rich or poor. People have their own ways to enjoy it. It's not for others to interfere. Mother-in-law scolded sister-in-law, who had always been cold to me. You think I don't know? It's obvious something's been going on behind my back. That's not true. Really, I find your envious heart far more impoverished. Then my brother-in-law chimed in. Aren't you always sleeping through concerts? It seems you're oblivious, but it's glaringly obvious. Brother-in-law chuckled. Sure, sister-in-law graduated from a music conservatory and has some awards, but she became complacent and stopped improving. You have to practice your instrument every day, otherwise your skills deteriorate. If you're going to talk about what music is, then you should first strive to be better yourself, said brother-in-law. Brother-in-law regretted that he couldn't be straightforward with his wife about her lacking skills and attitude as a musician, but doing blatant harm to his brother's wife was something he couldn't stomach. You have neither awareness nor ambition as a musician. I think it's time for you to leave our family. I'm tired of supporting someone who shows no promise of growing. There was a good opportunity to say it. You're one to talk, old lady. Your music sense is so outdated. I can't even listen to it. It's the sound of someone who caters to the poor, so of course I'd be thrilled to leave this awful musical family. Sister-in-law's strong words continued. She declared she would go solo, make a fortune, and show everyone. I thought people like her were incapable of self-reflection, but I didn't expect this level of rage. In the end, she stormed off, throwing a concert ticket on the ground. Mother-in-law picked it up and handed it to me. Let's go. She took my hand and we started walking. My second experience with a classical concert was truly moving. Different musicians and conductors bring a unique vibe and structure to the same piece. I wondered why the same piece could sound so different. I discovered new interpretations and learned so much. My mother-in-law seemed to notice my enthusiasm. After, the tension between my brother-in-law and sister-in-law reached a boiling point. Attempts to compromise and start anew failed, leading to their eventual divorce. My former sister-in-law hastily organized her solo concert. Ignoring advice, she overconfidently rented a venue that holds 5,000 people. Even popular classical concerts rarely fill such large spaces. Unsurprisingly, tickets didn't sell, and she ended up buying many herself to make the hall look less empty. Merchandise sat unsold, leaving her with an overstocked warehouse. Her second solo concert was equally dismal, attracting only a handful of attendees. Lacking both talent and a likable personality, she was unpopular. Online criticism abounded. Unable to pay her staff or cover other costs, she quickly sank into debt. Attempts at street performances were met with comments like, "You're terrible, stop annoying us," and even resulted in water being thrown at her. On my end, my mother-in-law suggested that I should get professional music training, given my apparent talent. I was both surprised and delighted by the suggestion, though I felt it was a little late to start learning an instrument. But it felt like an opportunity I had given up on was presenting itself again, and I couldn't believe it. I was told the choice of instrument was up to me. I'm considering the violin, especially since my husband has been helping me with it. My mother-in-law found a top-notch instructor who has nurtured many skilled violinists. I even began accompanying the family on their concert tours and helping out behind the scenes. Every day feels blissful as I spend more time with music and feel myself improving. My current dream? To perform a solo accompanied by my husband on the piano.
Approaching 30 and desperate to get married, I was constantly asking friends, "Don't you know any good guys?" That's how I met Jeff, through a friend of a friend. We dated for just under a year and decided to get married. But 2 months into our marriage, I had reached my breaking point. I wanted a divorce as soon as possible. There were some red flags while we were dating, but my desire to get married was so strong that I ignored all of Jeff's flaws. I was the epitome of hindsight is 2020. My name is Olive. I'm 29 and I work as a nurse. Jeff, who was 8 years older, is an incredibly vain and dishonest man. First of all, he lied about his job title. Jeff was just a supermarket clerk, not holding any position he claimed. I don't mean to be judgmental, but he told me he was the store manager. And since he was 37, I believed him. But the lie was exposed when we were deciding on wedding guests, and he said, "We have to invite the store manager and assistant manager." What? You said you were the store manager, right? When I asked Jeff, he casually revealed, "I never said that. I said I want to be the store manager someday." Exposed quietly. What's that? You were lying? I was quite shocked and felt betrayed, but the wedding venue was already booked and we had met each other's families. "If you don't like it, that's fine. We don't have to get married," Jeff threatened, and I regret saying, "No, let's get married." "You didn't fall in love with my job title, but with me, right? The details don't matter, so just follow me." Is that so? Jeff was trying to act cool, but frankly, he looked foolish. If that's the case, don't lie about being the store manager in the first place. I wanted to point that out, but I kept quiet to avoid a fight. The next lie was about our house. This lie led to us living with Jeff's family. Since Jeff and I were both living with our parents before marriage, I suggested, let's build a house halfway between our parents' homes. I had a strong desire for a new single-family home. I grew up in a run-down rental house, and I wanted my own home after getting married. I had been saving diligently for that. Jeff agreed immediately, so our dates often involved visiting housing expeditions, and we met with many real estate agents. But when it was time to narrow down our choices, shall we go with the place we saw last week? Being near an elementary school is good, right? When I asked, Jeff said, "My sister says living near an elementary school is noisy. She wants to be near a convenience store. And my mom wants to be near a hospital. My dad just wants the place to display his puzzles." What? Why are your sister-in-law, mother-in-law, and father-in-law's wishes coming to this? I was surprised because I thought Jeff and I would live alone. What? You knew this all along, right? I'm the eldest son. We're building a new 2-family house. So of course, the family will live together. This was news to me. I had been talking about a home for just the two of us, and I thought Jeff had agreed. If you're going to say that, I'm the eldest daughter and my mom is alone at home. Jeff's house has both his father and mother, right? You're a woman and I'm a man. Our positions are different. Besides, your mother has accepted that her daughter is getting married. That's true, but I didn't hear about that. I'm an only daughter, and I was initially worried about my mother living alone, so I wanted to marry, but I couldn't find a man who met my conditions. My mother told me, I'm fine, so think about your happiness first. That's when I started dating Jeff, but I didn't say anything. But look, my sister doesn't work, and my mom and dad are living on their pensions. We, as the eldest son's family, have to support them. Wait a minute, don't include me in that so casually. I can't accept that my sister-in-law is included, let alone my in-laws. I don't want to work because I want to play every day, she seems to say. My mother-in-law has a similar personality to sister-in-law, and my father-in-law is quiet, but he just lazes around, watching TV and doing jigsaw puzzles with mother-in-law and sister-in-law, never doing any housework. What? You're the eldest son's wife! Don't you want to support the family? I was speechless. Is this guy serious? If so, he can support them on his own salary. My dream of a new single-family home is rapidly deflating. Jeff is adamant. I'm not backing down. If you don't like it, we can divorce. If that's the case, let's live with your family. For now. I think this was my best play. I postponed building a house. I didn't want to waste the money I had saved for my dream home when I was single. So we moved in with Jeff's family after getting married. Jeff works at a supermarket, and I'm a nurse, so we both work shifts. I also work nights. Soon after moving in, I was awakened by mother-in-law, pulling off my blanket and slapping me awake, saying, "You're a failure as a wife if you sleep all day." I just got home, and I have to work tomorrow night. Stop complaining and do the housework. Make our lunch. Wait, what are you doing? I silently pushed mother-in-law out of the room. This is no joke. I'm tired. Olive, who do you think you are? I heard mother-in-law still making noise in the hallway, but I ignored her. I locked the door, put in earplugs, and went back to sleep. I woke up around 3 p.m. and did the housework. It's strange. Why do I have to do all the housework and work when there are 3 other healthy adults in this house? Then my husband came home. Hey, Olive, I heard you were home but didn't make lunch for Mom and the others. I was tired. They make and eat their own food when I'm not here, so they can do the same when I'm asleep. Jeff scolded me while his parents and sister-in-law watched, smirking behind him. What about your work? You said you were working until tonight. I left early because my sister called about a family emergency. Just because I didn't make lunch? Are you stupid? Oh, I accidentally spoke my mind. I added fuel to the fire and got scolded even more by Jeff. Is marriage always this hard on the wife's side? I never had a moment's peace in my in-laws' house, so I often made excuses to go home to my parents when I was tired or had a day off. My mother welcomed me without a word. I wanted to divorce, but couldn't say it. Then, the talk of moving to my parents' house came up. They want us to move out next year? Currently, the rental house where my mother lives is leaking quite badly. The landlord has decided to demolish it rather than make extensive repairs. That's right. It's not immediate though, but there are shelter cats, so it has to be a pet-friendly apartment. After my father passed away, my mother began volunteering to temporarily care for stray and lost cats. Though it was a rented house, it was nearly 50 years old, and the landlord was understanding, so it was possible. Then I'll help you look too. I found a good reason to spend time on my days off. It's good for my mother, and I love looking at properties myself. It was more than killing 2 birds with 1 stone. It was like killing 3. While visiting several real estate agents, a single-family home is a dream within a dream, my mother muttered. Wait, if I divorce, that would solve the problem, right? A house is a lifetime purchase, and I want to live with someone I genuinely want to be with. Oh? Cat ear construction. It was a construction company we happened to find, but there were pictures of cats on the sign, and a banner in front of the entrance read, "Homes for Cat Lovers." We couldn't help but go into the store. The shop assistant was a very friendly woman. We have something called a catio, an outdoor cage. She enthusiastically explained the facilities they could provide. Apparently, there are sunrooms for cats who like to bask in the sun and large cages that allow cats to safely go outside through their own entrance. We listened intently and took many brochures. As we left the store, I declared, "I'm going to divorce and live with my mom." "What are you talking about all of a sudden?" My mother was surprised, but said nothing more. I can't imagine Jeff, my in-laws, or sister-in-law changing, and the harassment will likely get worse. I have no intention of just going along with it. When I got home, it was already evening. I hurriedly prepared dinner. I put the brochures in an eco bag on the sofa to look at later. The laundry I had hung out in the morning was still there, and the cereal and spoons that my in-laws and sister-in-law had eaten for lunch were left exactly as they were on the kitchen table. "You're always out and about, even though you're a wife. I'm starving." "Sorry, but sister-in-law could have made it too." "What? That's not funny." Sister-in-law was pouting angrily, but I decided not to care. We'll be strangers soon anyway. When my husband came home late, he yelled, "Hey, there's only $700 in the joint account for this month's living expenses." "Oh, sorry. There was some office trouble and my salary is delayed," I lied. "All right, make sure to deposit it as soon as you get paid. Otherwise, we'll divorce." "Okay." Actually, last month, when we moved in together, we discussed how to handle living expenses. Jeff insisted that I put almost all of my $2,500 salary, and he would put $700 into a joint account. He said the rest would be his allowance, but that was unacceptable. I insisted on equal amounts, and by hook or by crook, I've only put in $700 for the last 2 months. After that, the days continued without much change. I consulted a lawyer, prepared for divorce, organized my belongings, tidied up my parents' house, and was busy with work. Jeff and I never had the same days off, but recently he started going out with his parents and sometimes sister-in-law. I thought it was unusual, but it was convenient for me as well. One day, Jeff said, "I've bought a newly built 2-family house. We're going to sign the loan contract together next Monday. Just so you know, if you oppose, we'll divorce." He even showed me the divorce papers. "What? A house? What do you mean?" "You brought home housing brochures, didn't you? Well, I went with another major manufacturer, but since we're building it, according to your wishes, I'll need all your savings." I had indeed told him about my home savings fund when we were touring real estate agents together, but... "Can I see those divorce papers, please?" My mind went blank at this shocking turn of events, but this was actually a chance. I meekly took the divorce papers, looking down. They were filled out properly, with even my in-laws' names in the witness section. I almost burst out laughing. Jeff didn't know I was preparing for a divorce, so he was trying to make me obey by threatening me with the thing I hated most, divorce. How naive. I used to hate the idea of divorce. But now I want to get divorced as soon as possible. I quickly signed the divorce papers and submitted them the next morning. I hadn't brought any large items like furniture, and I had been moving things out little by little, so it was an easy move. I went straight back to my parents' house. I ignored all the calls and emails from Jeff, even though I didn't come home that night. Later, my ex-husband came to my parents' house. He was furious, and so were my in-laws and sister-in-law. "Hey, what's going on? Why haven't you come back home?" "I just got divorced because you gave me the divorce papers," I answered calmly. "Don't mess with me! I built a house!" "You built a house without consulting me. You said if I opposed, we'd divorce, so that's on you." Perhaps because we were at my parents' house, mother-in-law was more subdued than usual. "Olive? Jeff must have been joking." "Joking with real divorce papers is in very poor taste. I'm getting divorced because our personalities don't match at all. That's the #1 reason for divorce." Sister-in-law also screamed, "We'll be in trouble without you! Who will pay the living expenses? Who will pay the mortgage?" I replied, "Well, that's for your family to figure out. I'm a stranger now. Why do I need to take care of a healthy sister-in-law in the first place?" Father-in-law didn't say anything, but glared at me. "I never thought you were such a cold woman," Jeff said. "Oh, that's what they call a difference in values. See? Another perfect reason for divorce," I teased. When I consulted with my lawyer, I was told that it's not easy to get a divorce based solely on personality differences or differences in values. However, in Jeff's case, he lied about his profession and income, and his usual behavior was nothing short of moral harassment. He unilaterally tried to make me pay all the living expenses. The last straw was when he bought a 2-family house without my consent and threatened me with a filled-out divorce application. The reasons for divorce were clear. I won't accept a divorce. Even if you say you won't accept it, you wrote it yourself, and father-in-law and mother-in-law are witnesses, aren't they? I showed him the screen of my mobile phone. It was good that I took a photo before submitting it to the office. Then my mother appeared, filming with her mobile phone. What do you think you're doing to my daughter? I've called the police. I'm recording all of this. I can't make it public. My mother was furious, though she hadn't said anything to me. Father-in-law was panicked by my mother's intensity. Calling the police is troublesome. It's bad for our public image. Stop it. I thought father-in-law was a man who never spoke, but it seems he does at times like this. I realized in a strange way that Jeff's vanity was inherited from his father. With that, Jeff and the others retreated in disgrace. What are we going to do? We can't pay the loan. There's nothing to do but cancel it. I heard their conversation, but if it was after the main contract, there would be a penalty for cancellation. And with Jeff's income alone, a house would be impossible. Serves him right. Afterward, perhaps concerned about public image, the compensation money from the divorce trial was transferred without issue. And a few months later, my mother's and my dream house was completed. A newly built, single-family house by Cat Ear Construction, perfect for our rescue cats to live comfortably. The construction company, knowing my mother's activities, built a perfect house for us at a much lower price than the market rate. Both my mother and I were thrilled. I rushed and made a big mistake. But if I hadn't married, I probably wouldn't have thought to build this house. Watching the cats basking in the sun and sleeping contentedly, I began to think that all's well that ends well.
What's the point of a husband who won't stand up for his wife? My daughter was being bullied by her mother-in-law, and her husband, my son-in-law, wouldn't even defend her. Instead, he said, "Mother-in-law, this is just part of her education as a wife. If you don't like it, take her back home." So I did just that. I brought my daughter back home with me. I'm a 50-year-old woman named Susie. I live with my only daughter, Maureen. My husband passed away in a car accident when I was young, and Maureen was in kindergarten. Since then, I've raised her on my own. I won't lie. It's been tough. I'm sure there were many days when she felt lonely or upset. But she graduated high school and went on to college. After college, she got a job and became a working adult. Maureen works for a well-established local company that runs various businesses like a bakery, a pharmacy, and real estate. It's a solid company. About a year ago, after working there for 3 years, Maureen told me she had a boyfriend. He was a polite and quiet young man, a sales rep from one of their clients. I was hopeful that he would be a good match for my outgoing daughter, Maureen. "Mom, I've decided to marry Ricky." She told me this with a smile about 3 months ago. I was thrilled that she had finally found happiness and celebrated grandly. We went all out for the wedding and the housewarming. At first, Maureen seemed ecstatic, but as time passed, she sounded less and less cheerful, and it became harder to get in touch with her. I thought it was just typical post-wedding blues, so I decided to wait for her to reach out. Maureen's an adult. It's not my place to meddle, I thought. But I was wrong. "Hey, Maureen looks really worn out. That's not just wedding blues. Are you sure she's okay?" My friend Karen, who lives near Maureen, told me this. "What do you mean?" "Her complexion is terrible. I asked if she was pregnant, but she said no. She looked really sad. Have you heard anything?" Karen's tone was somewhat accusatory. "I haven't been able to reach her lately. She's not answering her phone. You should try contacting her again." Encouraged by Karen's insistence, I called Maureen once more. "Hello, Maureen. It's Mom. Just checking in on you." Maureen answered, but there was only silence. "Maureen, can you hear me? are you okay? Mom, I... Maureen broke down crying on the phone. Maureen, are you okay? Mom, I'm not okay. Hearing that Maureen wasn't doing well, I regretted not visiting her sooner. I've been so wrapped up in work that I've neglected her. But Maureen always put on a brave face for me, always cheerful. Now she's in tears, saying she's not okay. I held back my emotions and rushed to Maureen's side. Maureen, Mom's here. Mom, When I saw Maureen, she looked worn out, a shadow of herself from just a few months ago. What happened to you? I hugged Maureen and rubbed her back. Seemingly relieved, Maureen began to speak through her tears and sobs. Ricky's parents are bullying me. They say I'm uncivilized because I was raised by a single mom, so they're disciplining me. I looked at Maureen's hands. Her once beautiful fingertips were now cracked and sore. This is terrible. They tell me to wash dishes with cold water to save hot water. They even tell me to hand wash clothes before using the washing machine. What? Apparently, her mother-in-law insists that Maureen hand wash her clothes as a pre-wash. And I have to mop the floor every morning. Fuming, Maureen added, "What hurts the most is when they badmouth you, Mom." She burst into tears. I was livid and yelled at Ricky's parents. "What are you doing to my daughter?" Ricky's parents came out from the living room. "What's going on?" "Who do you think you are, making a scene in our home?" "You're bullying my daughter under the guise of discipline." They retorted, "This is why we can't deal with women from single-parent homes." "We're just disciplining an uncivilized girl. Your attitude is unacceptable." They began to mock us. "What's going on?" Ricky came out after hearing the commotion. "Ricky, your wife is so flawed that we're disciplining her, and her unreasonable mother is making a fuss." Ricky's mom reported to him as if tattling. I confronted Ricky. "If you're her husband, don't just stand there. Help Maureen." "You're misunderstanding. Maureen is failing as a wife. My parents are just trying to make her presentable." Ricky arrogantly defended his parents. "You're a failure as a husband. If you can't protect your own wife, stop this nonsense." I was furious and lunged at Ricky. Ricky retorted, "You're taking advantage of my parents' kindness. I did you a favor by marrying a woman from a single-parent home. If you have a problem, take her back with you." With that, he shook off my hand. I lost my balance and fell at the entrance. "Mom, are you okay?" Maureen rushed to my side. "I'm fine, Maureen. You don't need to stay here any longer. Get a divorce." When I urged Maureen to divorce, she weakly nodded. "Okay, I understand." As we were about to leave, Ricky's parents sneered. "You're probably going back to some rundown apartment. Feel free to come back any time." "Yeah, but only if you apologize deeply." Ricky's parents took turns mocking us. I quickly retorted, "You're the ones who don't get it. This house isn't yours. Don't get it twisted." "What are you talking about? This house was inherited by Maureen from her grandfather, right? What's hers is mine." Ricky insisted it was his, refusing to listen. Actually, inherited property doesn't automatically become the spouse's. That's the law. I pulled out a piece of paper from my bag and showed it to them. It was a copy of the land registry for the house, proving that I was the legal owner. My father, Maureen's grandfather, left this house to me, not directly to Maureen. I've been the one paying the taxes. Ricky and his parents were dumbfounded. I calmly explained that I had gifted them the house as a wedding present, free of rent and taxes. "What? I've never heard about this, Ricky." "I don't know. She's probably bluffing." Ricky and his parents refused to believe us. "Listen, you have no right to live here. If you understand, leave." Despite my declaration, they remained defiant. "That's your problem. We're staying. You're the one who should leave." "Fine. I'll see you in court," I said, taking Maureen with me as we left the house. As we exited, I noticed neighbors gathered, whispering among themselves after hearing the commotion. Among them was my friend Karen. "Are you okay?" "Sorry for causing a scene." Karen looked concerned. I'll explain everything later, I said, hugging Maureen as we left. After that, Ricky and his family tried to continue living in the house, but word had spread in the neighborhood. People had noticed Maureen's declining health since her marriage. When it became known that they had bullied Maureen, tried to kick her out, and even attempted to take over the house, they were shunned as a disgraceful family. Living in a small town, word travels fast. It didn't take long for us to hear about Ricky and his family situation through Karen. Their reputation had plummeted, and they were even told not to dispose of their trash at the community dump. Apparently, they fled in the night. Karen told me, chuckling. Within a month of us leaving, Ricky had called my cell phone multiple times. It's your fault we can't live there anymore because of the harassment. Apologize now. I'm not sure what you're talking about. I brushed him off. Apologize to us, and we'll clear up the misunderstanding with the neighbors. Then we'll forgive you. He still seemed to think they'd done nothing wrong. I was so disgusted that I hung up. A week after the calls, Ricky and his family showed up at my house unannounced. They were stunned when they arrived. Yes, I live in one of the city's most luxurious high-rise apartments. In fact, my late husband ran a company, and I took over as CEO after his passing. Working hard for Maureen's sake, the company grew, and now I can afford to live in a high-rise. Upon discovering this, Ricky and his family immediately changed their tune. We're really sorry. We had no idea you were so well off, Ricky said, forcing a smile. Yes, it's our fault for not knowing better. If we'd known you lived here, we would have treated you differently, Ricky's mom added. So you're apologizing because I live here? I asked sarcastically. No, actually, we sold our house to live with Ricky and Maureen, but now we have nowhere to go, Ricky's mom continued. Yes, we wanted to provide a good home for our parents, so we proposed living together, Ricky added. We sold our house for that reason, and now we're stuck in a rundown apartment, Ricky's mom said, feigning tears. Mom, don't cry. So, can you help us out? Could you either give us some financial support or let us live in an empty room in this high-rise? Ricky shamelessly asked for assistance. I put on a smile and said, Remember what you did to my daughter? Even if you've forgotten, I never will. Please leave. What? You're abandoning your own family? Maureen, who had witnessed the whole thing, immediately called the police. The police arrived promptly, found the 3 people, and quickly sent them away. Turns out Maureen had consulted the police several times after her divorce, saying her ex-husband was stalking her, wanting to reconcile. Her ex's family continued to show up at her apartment complex, but the concierge handled it. They've been scraping by in a cheap, run-down 2-bedroom apartment ever since. They squandered the money from selling their house on new furniture during the move, leaving them with almost nothing. Ricky's parents can't adjust to a less luxurious lifestyle and continue to live recklessly. Their son Ricky is worn out from being exploited by his parents. Moreover, the reason for the divorce got out because he used to be a salesman who frequented Maureen's company. As a result, he's been banned from Maureen's company and lost a major client, derailing his career. Even Ricky's parents have started looking for work, realizing the gravity of the situation. But due to their age, skills, and neighborhood gossip, they're struggling to find employment. The jobs they do find don't pay well, and they continue to live in hardship. I decided it would be a waste to leave my father's house vacant, so I've opened it up as a community center for the neighborhood. I occasionally check in to make sure Ricky's family isn't causing trouble. Maureen told me, I'm an adult now, and I wanted to handle my husband myself. I didn't want to worry you, Mom. I've been telling her, it's not shameful to ask for help. The sooner you speak up, the less you'll suffer. So speak up sooner from now on. After the divorce, Maureen has been living in my high-rise apartment and continues to work at the company she's been with since before her marriage. She was downcast when she first came back home, but now she's back to her old self and helps around the house. We plan to live happily together for the foreseeable future.
Nancy, you are way too dramatic. It's just cooking. Even if it's for 3 more people, it doesn't change the workload that much, does it?
My husband said with a look that resembled watching a child throw a tantrum, and I was at my wit's end.
Why do I have to take care of my sister-in-law and her kids? With a strained voice, I blurted out, "Well, I'm leaving then." My name is Nancy. I have been living a peaceful life with my husband, Joe. Joe lost his father when he was a child, and since then, he and his sister Mary were raised by their stepmom. I heard she was a very kind lady, but she passed away before Joe and I met. After that, Joe and Mary supported each other as siblings. That's why they are very close. When I met Mary before our marriage, she was in tears of joy because her brother was getting married. She was the epitome of a devoted sister, crying and saying, "My big bro finally found his happiness." Joe used to tell me he was grateful that I married him despite his complicated family situation, but the situation didn't bother me one bit. I fell in love with him because he's efficient, can handle anything, and has a strong sense of responsibility. Shortly after we got married, I found out I was pregnant. Joe was thrilled, and I couldn't wait to meet our little one. Knowing that the baby was on the way, we moved to a slightly bigger apartment, but that turned out to be a mistake. It was a sheer coincidence that we moved close to Mary's place. I didn't have a bad impression of Mary, so living near her wasn't an issue for me. However, just a few days after we moved in, while Joe and I were trying to settle in and unpack our stuff, Mary showed up. "Hello! I came here to see you, Nancy." "Oh, hi, Mary." To be honest, I was taken aback that Mary had just dropped by our place. Even though we were family, isn't it common courtesy to at least call before showing up? As I pondered the difference between my common sense and hers, her kids burst from behind her and started roaming around the apartment. Mary got married way before Joe and I married each other and is the mother of twin boys. Her twins plopped themselves on the living room couch as if they owned the place and began playing video games, while Mary nonchalantly started snooping around the rooms. Even though this is her brother's place, isn't it odd to just go through each room without asking? As I was feeling uneasy, Mary raised her voice, sounding impressed. "Wow, you live in a nice place. Nancy, you're a stay-at-home wife, and just with my brother's income, huh?" Yeah? "That's nice. Joe is smart and earns well. My husband is the worst. He doesn't make much money, and he's not bright. I guess it's not good to marry for looks." She sighed. She blurted out loud enough for her twins to hear, bad-mouthing her husband. It was clear that Mary and I had completely different values. Realizing the situation, I mentally put a boundary between Mary and myself, but it seems that she was quite attached to me. "Well, I'm gonna lounge on the couch a bit," she declared, and then turned on the TV without permission. As I was surprised by her behavior, as if she were in her own home, one of the twins spoke up. "I'm hungry," addressing Mary. She looked annoyed and said, "Ugh, really?" and then glanced at me. "Nancy, is there anything for the kids? They're hungry." Because Mary directed the topic to me, the child came over and repeated, "I'm hungry." I couldn't just ignore the hungry children, so I made an early lunch. Since we had leftover rice from the day before, I made some fried rice. Upon serving it, they started eating it with gusto. There were only spoons for adults in our homes, and they seemed too big for the twins, causing fried rice to spill from the corners of their mouths. Mary made no attempt to clean up the mess. While eating her own fried rice, she advised, "You're having a child too, right? You should get spoons and stuff for kids." Her tone was rather condescending. Furthermore, she remarked, "Don't you think the fried rice portion is a bit small? It wasn't enough for me. Do you have anything else?" It's just Joe and me living here. Even the leftover rice wasn't that much. I was hungry too, but I handed all the fried rice to Mary and her children. Her audacity honestly made me angry. But she is Joe's only family. If things went sour between Mary and me, the one who would be hurt is Joe. Suppressing my anger, I answered, "We have instant noodles." Mary reluctantly agreed, "All right, that'll do." When I made the instant noodles and handed it to her, she said, "You're pregnant. You need to eat nutritious food, not instant stuff. It's bad for the baby." I genuinely wanted to kick her out of here right then and there. Just when I was getting a headache from Mary and her kids hanging around like they owned the place, I hinted at her. When are you planning to go back today? Don't you have to prepare for dinner? But Mary suggested something outrageous. Huh? I'm staying tonight. I want to see my brother. What? Since lunch was a bit of a letdown, make sure to serve a proper dinner. It's not good for the kids otherwise. Pointing at the kids who were running around in our apartment, Mary said this, and I finally protested, "Sorry, but I can't let you guys stay here. We're not prepared for guests. We don't have extra bedding or toys for the kids. It will be boring for them." "Oh, okay then. We'll leave after dinner. Make sure to get the bedding before we come next time." I was quite annoyed with Mary, who was acting high and mighty, but I left them behind and went out to buy dinner. Hoping Joe would ask her not to drop by unannounced, I suppressed my irritation and served the food. Joe came home while Mary and the children were eating dinner. Without surprise at her presence, Joe said, "Oh, Mary, you're here," and joined us for dinner. Even after dinner, Mary and her kids lingered around for a while before finally leaving. That's when I finally told Joe about what happened today. The fact that Mary just suddenly showed up, how she threw me for a loop by demanding lunch out of the blue, and that she ordered me to buy bedding for them. After telling him everything, Joe gave a thoughtful, "I see," and then responded with an answer I wasn't expecting. "Well then, we need to buy it sooner rather than later. We should also consider buying one for children. Let's go buy them by car on our next day off." Wait, are you serious? Joe nodded as if it was the most natural thing in the world, leaving me feeling incredulous. Despite telling him how hard it has been with me being pregnant, why would he prioritize his sister's requests over mine? I told Joe, "To be honest, I'm not thrilled with the idea of Mary showing up unexpectedly or staying over. It's a hassle and really stressful. Mary and I lost our parents, so we don't have a place to call home, and she probably sees this place like home and feels comfortable around you because you're her sister-in-law. Try to be understanding. Plus, you're going to be a mom soon, so it's good practice to care for kids. I guess you're feeling awkward because you're not close with her yet. You'll get used to it, just bear with it at first." Okay. The reason I reluctantly agreed was because I love Joe. There was a faint hope that if I could get along with Mary, maybe we could have peaceful days. On his next day off that week, he actually went to buy bedding. He also bought a lot of toys. They were obviously for the twins, but Joe laughed and said, "Our kids can use them when they get older." As for me, I wondered whether it was really okay for our children to be given hand-me-down toys, but I couldn't exactly tell him to return what he had bought. Mary seemed to like our home, now with bedding and toys. Since then, she started showing up to our place nearly every week. I asked Mary once, "Is your husband okay with being left alone? Doesn't he feel lonely?" But Mary flippantly dismissed my concern with, "He's fine. I don't care about a low-income man like him." I was trying to hint at her to go home, but she didn't get it. The only reason I couldn't directly tell her to stop coming or to leave was because I'm a timid person. I told Joe several times that Mary's overnight stays were stressful for me. At first, he listened to me seriously, but wouldn't budge from his position that I could eventually get along with Mary. Over time, Joe seemed to get annoyed with me talking ill of Mary, and he started to ignore what I was saying. The baby in my belly was growing healthily. Looking at the sonogram, I kept worrying about whether it was okay to stay with Joe. My breaking point came when I asked him, for the umpteenth time, to tell Mary not to come visit us anymore. "That's impossible. Mary is apparently getting a divorce." What? A divorce? Mary always spoke ill of her husband, so I had suspected that their marital relationship wasn't good, but I hadn't heard anything about a divorce. "She doesn't have any other place to stay, you know, so I thought we could live together." Why would Joe say something like that when I've been telling him how much I don't want Mary to come over? Looking at my speechless face, he turned his gaze on me as if he was looking at a petulant child. "Nancy, you're overreacting. Cooking for 3 more people isn't that much of a difference." I was at my wit's end. It was clear as day that Joe valued Mary more than he valued me. I'm leaving then. Ignoring Joe's startled, "What?" I fetched the largest suitcase from our closet. As I hurriedly packed my things, Joe was in a state of panic. "Why are you doing this?" I glared at him sharply in response to his flustered question. "You're always going to prioritize Mary over me, aren't you, Joe? It's always been like that. I thought you'd eventually say something to her, but you never did. And why am I the one who always has to do the housework like a maid? She comes over every week. She could at least help me." "Then you should have just told her that." "I didn't say anything to her because you matter to me, but I can't handle it anymore. Let's divorce." With my voice trembling with humiliation and anger, Joe was left gaping in shock. Ignoring him, I finished packing and returned to my parents' home. I explained the situation to my parents, told them I was getting a divorce, and promptly prepared the divorce papers. I filled out my section and mailed it with a letter saying, "I don't need any settlement, just the divorce." A few days later, Joe showed up at my parents' home. "It's ridiculous to divorce over something like this. What about our unborn child?" "Thankfully, my parents are healthy. I will raise the child with their help. So, Joe, please don't interfere with us anymore." "Why? Is it so wrong to care for your sibling?" "If we're married, I wanted you to consider me and our unborn child first. But in your world, Mary is always the most important. I can't be with you anymore, Joe." I coldly stated my intentions, and while Joe tried to persuade me otherwise, I did not change my mind about the divorce. In the end, a defeated Joe signed the divorce papers and left my parents' house. We were happy before Mary came to our home. The thought brought tears to my eyes as I watched Joe's shrinking figure depart. A few weeks later, I received a call from Mary. "Ah, Nancy, can you come and help me? I'm moving, but I don't have anyone to take care of my kids. Joe is so down that he's not helping at all." According to Mary, Joe had become an empty shell after our divorce. He was constantly distracted at work, made mistakes he usually wouldn't, and wasn't eating properly. Joe decided to see a doctor due to his work colleague's recommendation. He decided to take some time off, but according to Mary, he barely leaves his bedroom. So, instead of her useless brother, she asked me to help with the move. "Why should I have to help you?" "Huh? Well, you and I are sister-in-law. Plus, we got along pretty well, didn't we?" "We've never gotten along." On the other side of the phone, Mary seemed genuinely surprised, thinking that we were close. I had done my best to convey, "Go back to your place and don't come to our home," but it seems that feelings don't get across unless they're put into words. Regretting that I hoped she would understand, I laid out my feelings to Mary. "I may have married Joe, but I never intended to become your mother. I've asked you many times not to come over without calling. Why should I get along with someone who can't even respect that simple request?" "But I'm raising twins. It's hard, so it can't be helped." "If you had cooperated with your husband, wouldn't things have worked out? You found it bothersome to work with a disobedient husband and pushed everything onto me, right? I'm not a maid or anything. Do you really think I'd feel good about being treated like that? Imagine if you were in the same situation." Mary, seeming confused, countered, "But Nancy, aren't you my sister-in-law?" I sighed in response. "I divorced Joe, so you and I are complete strangers now. From now on, you and your brother should support each other and live together. We probably won't see each other again. Goodbye." After decisively ending the call, I blocked Mary's number. For a while, she continued to send me messages on WhatsApp telling me how hard her life was. Apparently, Joe spends his days crying, saying, "I wanted to see my kids," and the twins are in their mischievous phase. Mary seemed to be having a tough time taking on all the housework and parenting she had been neglecting. I was able to give birth to my baby safely. A healthy and adorable boy. For a while, I planned to rely on my parents, but once my child gets into daycare, I plan to go back to work. As a single mother, I was determined to raise him well. I will pour all my love into my son to make sure he never feels lonely without a father. "I'll make sure you're happy." Holding my finger with his tiny hand, he made me smile softly.